In the rugged mountains of Montana Territory, folks whispered about the man they called Bear McAllister. He lived alone in a cabin high above the timberline, with only his horse and his hound for company. Some said he once killed a grizzly with his bare hands. Others swore he'd been driven half-mad after losing his family to an avalanche years ago. Whatever the truth, nobody dared come too close. When the townsfolk of Red Hollow saw him ride down once a month to trade pelts for supplies, they'd stare but keep their distance. His beard was thick, his frame broad as an ox, and his eyes, a pale steel blue, seemed to look right through a person. Children hid behind their mothers. Men nodded stiffly. Women crossed the street. Nobody wanted to be the mountain man's wife, not even in jest. But that changed when Clara Bennett arrived. She stepped off the dusty stagecoach one bright morning, a small woman with dark auburn hair tied neatly under her bonnet. She wasn't a saloon girl or a mail-order bride, just a nurse traveling west, hoping to start fresh after the war had taken too much from her. She found work at Doc Avery's clinic and quickly earned the town's affection with her kind smile and gentle hands. One afternoon, Bear rode into town as usual, leading a mule loaded with beaver pelts. When he entered the general store, the air seemed to thicken. Conversation stopped. Even the owner, Mr. Tully, handled his goods with trembling hands. But Clara didn't flinch. She was restocking bandages when Bear's towering shadow fell across her. "You drop this," he said, holding out a small tin of salve she'd knocked over. "Thank you," she replied, meeting his gaze with calm curiosity. "You're Mr. McAllister, aren't you? The man who brings the finest pelts west of the Rockies?" He blinked, caught off guard. "I suppose that's me," he said quietly, placing a few coins on the counter. "Didn't mean to bother you." "You didn't," she said, smiling softly. "And if those scratches on your hand came from trapping, you should let me clean them. Infection can be a worse enemy than any bear." The whole store watched in silence as she gently took his rough, calloused hand and cleaned the small cuts with practiced care. Bear looked down at her, his massive frame awkwardly still. No one had touched him kindly in years. From that day on, Clara would sometimes see him around town. He never spoke much, but he always tipped his hat to her. The townsfolk whispered that she was the first woman to look the mountain man in the eye, and live to tell of it. Then came the blizzard. A fierce storm rolled down from the peaks, trapping Red Hollow in snow for 3 days. The bridge leading to the mines collapsed, leaving a group of men stranded, including Doc Avery. Clara, worried for her mentor, tried to organize a rescue. But no one dared venture into the storm. That night, she saddled her horse anyway. Before she could leave, a deep voice stopped her. "You'll never make it up there alone." Bear stood in the doorway of the livery, snow clinging to his coat, his breath clouding the air. "I have to try," she said. "Doc Avery needs medicine. He saved half this town." "I'll take you," he said simply. They rode through howling winds, Bear leading the way. His knowledge of the mountains was unmatched. When the storm grew worse, he built a shelter of pine boughs and kept the fire going while Clara slept beside him, shivering under his coat. By dawn, they reached the mine and found the men weak but alive. Clara tended to their frostbite while Bear carried the injured one by one through the snow. She watched him work silently, his strength tireless, his eyes calm and kind. He spoke little, but when he did, his words were steady and full of care. When they finally returned to town, everyone hailed Bear as a hero, though he only shrugged and said, "Didn't do nothing special." But Clara knew better. She saw the gentleness behind his rough exterior, how he brushed snow from her shoulders before helping others, how he made sure she drank water before tending the men. Beneath the beard and scars, there was a man with a heart bigger than the mountain itself. After that, she began visiting his cabin from time to time, bringing herbs and tea for the cold nights. The first time she came, he looked startled, as if he couldn't believe she'd found her way up there. "Didn't think you'd come," he muttered, scratching his neck. "I said I'd bring medicine," she replied, smiling. "Besides, it's peaceful up here." He chuckled, a deep, warm sound that surprised them both. Seasons changed. What started as visits became shared meals, laughter by the fire, stories of the past. She told him about her brothers lost in the war. He told her about the family he once had, taken by the avalanche. There were tears, but also quiet understanding. One spring evening, as the snow melted into streams and the valley bloomed with wildflowers, Bear stood on his porch watching the sunset. Clara came up the path, carrying a basket of bread. He turned to her, his eyes soft. "Clara, you could have gone anywhere. Why keep coming back here?" She stepped closer. "Because I see you, Bear. The man beneath the stories. The one with a gentle heart." He swallowed hard. "Folks say I ain't fit for nobody. They're wrong," she whispered, placing a hand on his chest. "You're the kindest man I've ever known." He looked at her for a long moment before gently taking her hand. "You sure, Clara, livin' up here ain't easy." She smiled. "I'm sure. A heart like yours makes any place feel like home." That summer, the bells of Red Hollow rang for the unlikeliest of weddings, the mountain man and the town nurse. Some said it was madness, others called it a miracle. But when folks saw how he looked at her, as if she were the first light after a long winter, even the skeptics fell silent. Years later, travelers passing through the valley would see smoke curling from a cabin chimney and sometimes catch sight of a tall man carrying water while a red-haired woman waved from the porch. They'd say that was Bear McAllister and his wife, living quiet and happy up in the mountains. And though nobody had wanted to be the mountain man's wife once, everyone agreed that Clara Bennett saw what no one else did, the gentle heart that made him worth loving.